If we haven't met before, I'm Sarah, an end-of-life planning advocate, normalizing conversations about end-of-life and estate planning before those conversations are necessary. I read a lot of estate planning books and blogs. The content in them hasn't changed much at all in the last century. Nearly all of the advice would be recognizable to my grandparents. And while the advice hasn't changed, our lives have. I always compare my situation to my grandpa's. My grandpa died in the late 1990s. Even if he hadn't planned anything, my mom could have walked into his house and figured it all out. Wrapping up his affairs would have been reasonably straightforward. She would have known where he banked because he had a checkbook, what stocks and bonds he owned because he had physical stock certificates. Subscriptions to things other than the newspaper weren't really a thing, and services sent a monthly physical bill. If the bill wasn't paid, the service would be turned off after a few months. Compare that to if I died tomorrow. If I didn't do any planning, how would a person do wrapping up my life? My banking is done online with statements sent to my email. Stocks are all in online brokerages. Services are largely auto-renewed and auto-billed to a credit card or a bank account. And since many of those services are for services and not for physical items, it wouldn't be obvious to someone else what services I even had. If I didn't do any planning, if I didn't write down passwords and accounts, where would somebody even start? In my always humble opinion, estate rules and estate planning guidance are in desperate need of an overhaul. Here are 6 reasons why. 1, all things digital. The digital afterlife is the biggest area where end-of-life and estate planning advice shows its age. Statistically, this makes sense. Most people who die are older, from a generation with little or no online presence. Estate law hasn't really changed much since ye olde times. It's based on rules that developed around physical items that exist in the real world, things that can be seen and touched. The rules focused on what should happen to a man's, always a man, women didn't get to own anything, a man's stuff after he died. Estate law is only starting to deal with how our digital lives will force changes to laws that have been in place largely unchanged since the 1500s. Even something as basic as money is digital. Not only do many of us now have online banking, but now there are cash transfer and bank-like but non-bank apps like PayPal and Venmo, which are entirely online. These digital items don't always fall neatly into the old rules. Number 2, little or no paper trail. In my grandpa's time, even if he hadn't done any planning, his accounts and his assets could be pieced together based on his mail, his bank statements, and his paper bills. However, today, many of us get few, if any, official items in the mail. Someone trying to wrap up our affairs might struggle to figure out what we have or what we subscribe to, especially if they don't have access to our email. Our services are auto-billed and auto-renew, so services like streaming services, utilities, and phone services will go on and on and on, and you or your estate will keep paying for them unless or until somebody knows to cancel them. And bank and credit card statements are sent to your email, making it harder for your people to access them. Ironically, the more things go digital and paperless, the more critical it becomes to document that information for the benefit of those people who will have to wrap up your affairs. Even if you only document your email addresses and a list of your basic subscriptions, having that little bit of basic information will help your people know where to start. 3rd, ownership. I'm going to try my hardest not to geek out about something that I love, but I know isn't everyone's cup of tea, but we don't own digital assets in the same way that you own physical items. Ownership is governed by the terms and conditions documents that we click through and don't read. and even me, and this thing is kind of my jam. The Kindle books you bought on Amazon aren't yours. Amazon uses language and graphics like buying and shopping carts to evoke in real life shopping, but you don't buy a Kindle book. You bought a non-transferable license to read a book. Your digital books aren't part of your estate and you can't leave them to anybody. Same thing with the music you purchased from the iTunes store. Do people still buy music from the iTunes store? I don't know, doesn't matter. Digital assets, photos, and social media accounts, what's yours and what isn't yours is not as straightforward as you might think, which can greatly complicate your ability to leave your digital stuff to others. Fourth, access. In ye olde times, when your estate was divided up, your estate consisted entirely of physical items. If you were left a lamp in the will, you got a lamp. These days, you not only need the legal right to the thing, but you need to be able to access the thing. In the digital world, that means usernames and passwords, and depending on the thing, codes, keys, digital wallets as well. If you don't have the information needed to access the information, some companies will help you access the decedent's digital stuff and others won't. Apple famously won't help anyone access somebody else's iPhone. Information saved in your iCloud account is an entirely different story for a different video, but Apple will not help you access the device. Another prime example of this is cryptocurrency. You can leave cryptocurrency like Bitcoin to someone in your will. That is a legally valid transfer of assets. However, and this is a massive however, the whole point of Bitcoin is that it is secured and encrypted with codes and keys and digital wallets, although I will not pretend to understand the details. If you leave someone Bitcoin in your will, but you don't leave them the necessary wallets and access details, they'll never be able to access that Bitcoin. Period. It's legally theirs, but it won't mean much without the ability to access it. 5, privacy and identity theft. Here's another issue related to the problem of access. Due to a combination of concerns about the possibility of fraud, identity theft, phishing, and privacy laws, companies have made it very hard for people who aren't you to get information about you and your accounts. This is a great thing while you're alive, but it makes it extra hard on people who legitimately need to deal with companies on your behalf or your estate after your death. Ever get frustrated talking to the cable company or the phone company about your own account? Try talking to them about somebody else's account. And that assumes you can even get an in real life person to talk to. Personally, I've been on both sides of this. I used to work at a bank in the department that dealt with these types of issues. I can tell you that a legitimate call that starts out with, "My aunt died and I need information about her account," and an identity theft attempt that begins, "My aunt died and I need information about her account," sound very much alike. In fact, they sound identical. And finally, number 6, chosen family. Maybe this says more about me and the circles that I run in, but these days, more people are surrounding themselves with chosen family. There is less of a reliance exclusively on blood family ties and marriage. In life, this is great, but if you don't do the paperwork, it can create gut-wrenching issues in an emergency situation or after a death. Many don't realize that next of kin determinations made by hospitals in a medical emergency or the courts after a death only care about legal relationships of blood or marriage. Hospitals and courts don't want to have to quantify friendship. They want cut and dried. Who is the closest person to you on your family tree? The systems are not designed for people who have chosen to surround themselves with unmarried partners, friends, or chosen family. If you don't do the paperwork, blood relations will be in charge of your body disposition and your estate after your death. Your nearest blood relations will get everything, while your chosen family or your unmarried partner will get nothing. When the people closest to you in life are not tied to you by blood or marriage, it becomes super critical to do the paperwork to ensure those people will have a role in your life in case of an emergency. If you found this video helpful, hit that like button and consider also hitting the subscribe button for regular end-of-life and estate planning content.